Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Empowered Chat. My name is Christina Andre, and I am with Raymond's marketing team. And with me today, I have Katie Stewart, who is our senior manager with our HR solutions team. Hi, Katie.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, we're going to be discussing the new cannabis law in Ohio. So, Katie, can you go through and tell us what is this new law and exactly what does it mean for employers?
Yeah, absolutely. So on November 7th of 2023, Ohio became the 24th state to legalize the adult use of recreational marijuana. So it is important for employers to remember, though, that marijuana is still, recreational use is still prohibited on the federal level. And in this law in Ohio, which is similar to most states that have passed laws, it doesn't provide any employee protections. So currently, there's only a handful of states that actually built in some sort of protection for employees within these laws. So employers are still allowed to continue with their workplace drug-free policies, which prohibit consumption of marijuana. And it's important for employers to remember that their employees may be under a false impression that now, because this is legal, that it means that employers might have to hire them regardless of what their usage is, or continue to employ them when they use or consume marijuana products. And that's just not the case.
Oh, so can you explain how this will impact culture within an organization and the hiring process?
Yeah. So when it comes to culture, I think it's always important for organizations to just make sure they have a firm understanding of what their current culture is, because some companies tend to be more conservative with their culture while others are more liberal, but it's important that companies are making decisions based on that culture. And I think this scenario should be just the same. Companies are going to have to make some decisions on if they want to make any changes to their policies and practices, or if they just want to continue with how they've been doing business. So, taking a look at their current workforce, the makeup of their current workforce, and understanding their turnover stats is going to be really important to help them make some of these decisions. For example, if an organization is struggling to keep talent, or if they're having a hard time attracting top talent, and their competitors go and change their policies, that could potentially expand the talent pool for their competitors and have an impact on their organization.
Okay. Can you dive in a little bit more about how this impacts your talent pool?
Sure. So, if you decide to keep testing, for example, for marijuana in your pre employment testing panel, and say your competitor decides to take it out of the panel of drugs that they're testing for, this could cause some individuals to seek employment at your competitor versus with you. Because you have to keep in mind, word definitely travels fast between job seekers. This is something that will be talked about. But the opposite is also true. So if you decide to remove marijuana from the panel of drugs that you test for, and your competitor decides to keep it, then that could encourage some, definitely not all, applicants to consider seeking employment with you rather than with your competitor. It is a really tough market out there right now for employers to find top talent. There's more jobs open than there are applicants to even fill those jobs. So employers really have to figure out how best to increase their talent pool and to bring top talent to their organizations. So again, the approach here will really depend on if the organization is having challenges already or not. If they are having challenges, then this may be something that they want to really consider hard and make a decision on if this could have an impact in a positive way for them. But they need to just make sure that they're tracking things. So if they're looking at collecting data while this law has passed, then they can make an educated decision on how this law is impacting their ability to attract talent and possibly keep talent as well.
So with that, I'm going to step into the employer shoes real quick. As an employer, what are my options?
Yeah, I would say you basically have three options at this point. The first option would be just keep your policies the same as they are today. So stay status quo. Your second option would be to wait and see what everyone else around you does. And then you can kind of start collecting that data. So if staying the course has an impact on your organization, then you'll know, right? You may have to make a change. But you could also then wait and see how the companies that have decided to make a change, how they've been impacted. And then your third choice would be to just go ahead and remove THC from your drug panel that you're using to test for pre-employment testing. So I actually was curious about what companies have done in other states that already had these laws in place for a while. So I did some crowdsourcing of some HR professionals to see what they've done, and in particular in states that have had these laws for about 5 years or so, and the results were pretty spread out. So about 20% of the people that responded said they have remained the course. Since the law came out till now, they have not made any changes to their policies or practices. And then 40% said they didn't make any changes for quite a few years. So about 3 years in or so, they decided to then stop the testing for pre-employment purposes. And the other 40% decided to change their policies as soon as the law passed.
Wow. So now that I know my options, I know some of the background. What are some other things that employers should be considering while making these decisions?
Yeah, there's quite a few things I would say that employers just need to keep in mind. One thing that is important for employers to remember is even if you do remove marijuana or THC from your panel, your drug panel that you're testing for pre-employment testing, you still will have the option of reasonable suspicion if that comes up. So if you have a reasonable suspicion that someone at work is under the influence of drugs or even alcohol for that matter, you can document your reasoning, which is always important to do, and then be able to send them for drug testing. Another thing that people will want to consider is if they have any positions that fall under Department of Transportation regulations, or if they have any federal contracts, because those will be very different sets of standards that need to be adhered to. I think it's also just important for employers to take a look at their current policies now, regardless of if they're really wanting to make any changes. It's just a great time to take a look at what are your current policies and are they covering and enforcing, first of all, everything that you want them to, but also everything that you're currently doing. And that can be for pre-hire, reasonable suspicion, as we talked about, as well as any post-accident drug testing procedures. Another thing that would be important would be to have a communication plan in place. So now that this law is in effect, employees are going to have questions. Employees are going to have questions if you make changes. They're going to have questions if you don't make changes. So having thought through what your stance is on why you're doing what you're doing is going to be important so that when those questions do come up, that you can have answers for your employees. I also think in creating that plan, it's important too to just keep in mind that you're not going to please everyone with your decisions. This is definitely a very polarizing topic. So as leaders and HR professionals, we just need to make sure that whatever decision is made it's the best decision and the right decision for the organization. And then be willing and open to continue to monitor the situation and potentially pivot if needed. Another thing that is important to think about when it comes to testing for marijuana, it can be complicated. So there isn't a lot of research or guidance on what amount of marijuana consumed is considered someone to be intoxicated, like there is with alcohol. There's that threshold. And you can't necessarily test to determine if someone is under the influence, like at that moment in time, like you can with alcohol. So employers should be considering the type of testing they want to use if they're going to continue to test. So, for example, there's kind of three different ways that you can test for THC. You can do a hair test, a urine test, or a saliva test. And each of those have different time frames of how long that THC has been in someone's system. So that's something to keep in mind if you are wanting to continue to do, say, pre-employment, but maybe you want to switch from doing urine testing to saliva testing now. And then one thing that is just a great kind of rule of thumb, I think, for employees or employers to think about is to consider treating marijuana usage the same as alcohol use. Alcohol is legal. Employees are still not authorized to be under the influence of alcohol while on the job. So that could be kind of your rule of thumb, is however you would treat if someone was under the influence of alcohol on the job, do the same for if you feel they're under the influence of any drug for that matter. Again, though, as I said above, or said before, the challenge here is that you can't necessarily test for that moment in time like you can with alcohol. So any usage that they have outside of the workplace on their personal time could ultimately impact the test results for their marijuana usage.
Thank you, Katie, so much for all this useful information. You provided some great insights for everyone who's listening. If you have any questions, feel free to contact one of our advisors. Thank you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.